Channel Sports Central being over our next team projection of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Missouri Tigers, a team that went 5-5 overall in the 2020 season. Not a terrible season at all from Missouri, making it to a 500 record. But will this team be better in 2021 is what we're going over here today. We're also going to go over a few players that this team will be losing, who they were returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with your previous 6 games for the 2020 season. And this team down the stretch, they played pretty well, but however, this team definitely took some losses, which certainly should not have been as bad as they were. They lost to Florida 17-41, which Florida was a good team, but that was a pretty terrible loss there. They did have a pretty good stretch in between the late parts of November into December. They had three straight wins there with South Carolina 17-10. They shut out Vanderbilt 41-0, which I do understand it's Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt, really anytime you're able to shut out a team is a good win. So for Missouri, that was a good win there against Vanderbilt. They also beat Arkansas 50-48 in a shootout. That was a high scoring game there. Arkansas being a pretty good team last season, that was a good win as well there for Missouri. They lost to Georgia 14-49, so the next week it didn't turn out so well. They also lost to Mississippi State to finish out the season 32-51. So this team was definitely very inconsistent, but over the course of the season, this team was able to beat the teams that they should have. They just could not beat any of their tough opponents. So overall for Missouri, this team started out the season 2-3, and they finished it up with a 3-2 record. So Missouri technically did improve over the course of the 2020 season, but Missouri certainly is a team that I think could have performed a bit higher than they did. But in the end, this team certainly was pretty young last year, so you got to consider that as well. But looking at returning production, you do return your starting quarterback, Connor Bazelak. He will be back for next season for Missouri, which is going to be a big return there as he put up some pretty good stats last season, just over 2,300 yards, as well as a 67% completion rate, which is pretty impressive for a quarterback, especially one that's pretty young. Also 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, so he could improve in the touchdown interception ratio, but overall not a bad season for him. He will be back next season. As for the running back core, you do lose your top one in Larry Roundtree. That's going to be a pretty tough loss there, as he put up over 1,000 yards last season and 14 touchdowns. I'd say that's probably the toughest loss that this team is having to face going into next season. As for the second running back, Tyler Beatty, he's coming back for next season, and he is definitely going to be a huge impact player, as he put up just right around 600 yards and 6 touchdowns last season for the Tigers. Otherwise, for the receiving core, you do return your top one. Chisholm, he's coming back for next season. He put up just over 450 yards and a touchdown. Damon Hazleton will not be returning to this team. He was the second wide receiver for Missouri last year, and he will not be back for next year. Of course, for him, if you look at his stats, he put up 400 yards and 1 touchdown over the course of 2020. Tusky Dove is also coming back for this team. He's their third wide receiver, and he's definitely going to be a big return there for this team in general. So watch out for him, especially going into next season, as he put up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. As for the offensive line, you lose 1 on there, 1 linebacker, 2 in the secondary. So overall, I'd say pretty good returning production for Missouri. This team does lose 3 on the defensive side, but otherwise, this team is looking, I'd say, pretty good on both sides of the ball going into next season. Chances of a bowl season, I'd say, are pretty good for Missouri. This team should be just as good or better, I'd say, in 2021 in comparison to 2020. How much improvement could there be, at least? This team definitely, I think, has got potential to be maybe an 8-10 win team, I'd say, at best. I don't see Missouri being like a SEC championship contender by any means, but I definitely think this team could put up some impressive wins going into next season, possibly a couple of big upsets as well. Looking at your schedule, you start off the season against Central Michigan on September 4th. You got Kentucky then on the road on September 11th. So your non-conference games are really split up in this schedule. You got one non-conference here and there and all over the place. So obviously you got Central Michigan there on the 4th. You got Southeast Missouri on the 18th. And then a couple of weeks later, actually the next week, you got Boston College on the road. Then you got North Texas as your last non-conference game. So you got 4 non-conference games, obviously, but all of them are pretty split up among each other. But otherwise for Missouri, this team doesn't have, I'd say, a terrible schedule. You don't have to play Alabama next season, which is definitely a positive. Texas A&M, you do have to play them. However, they're definitely going to be a good team. Same thing with Georgia and Florida. Both teams there will be pretty difficult next season. You do have to play Georgia on the road in Athens. So that is going to be a tough game there against Georgia on the road. I can see the Bulldogs definitely being a big contender next season for the college football playoff. But Looking at the first half of your schedule, of course, I'd say Central Michigan, that's a win, a pretty easy one. Kentucky's going to be a close one. With it being on the road and everything. Southeast Missouri will be a win. Boston College is going to be close. Tennessee will be close. North Texas will be a win as well. So you're getting 3 wins in your first 6 games. Not too terrible heading into the second half. That means, honestly, I could see this team getting 4 to 5 wins in your first 6 games. So that puts you in a pretty good position heading into a pretty tough second half of your schedule. You got to play Texas A&M, Georgia, and Florida, as well as Arkansas on the road in your last 6 games. So you have to consider that there. But otherwise, looking at the second half there, you got Texas A&M. That's going to be a close one. I'm not going to predict a loss yet for Missouri, but I'm definitely favoring Texas A&M in that matchup. Vanderbilt on the road, that's going to be a win. Georgia on the road, that's going to be a loss. I just don't see Georgia's going to be really good next season. JT Daniels, that team is going to be excellent. So I don't see Missouri going into Georgia and getting a win, especially in November. So I think Georgia's going to get the win there. South Carolina, Florida, and Arkansas are all 3 of those are winnable games for Missouri, but they're going to be close matchups for now. Ceiling will be 9-3 for Missouri next season. I think that's basically the top of where you could get. Your projection will be 7-5. So I've got you just above even for next season, for the regular season at least. So that puts you in a bowl game for sure. So for Missouri, not a terrible season at 7-5. I think 7-5 would definitely be a good record for Missouri next season, and 5-7 will be your floor, meaning the worst that you could be. So I'm pretty positive that this team will make it to a bowl game. Like, there's always a chance that they don't make it to a bowl game, but I definitely think it's much, much more likely than not that we'll see Missouri in a bowl game next season. That being said, that wraps up my projections for Missouri. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team, record predictions, all of that. Let me know down in the comments. But I appreciate you guys all watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys all later.